Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video. Today I'm doing a Patron-requested video reviewing the Kill Team Into the Dark competitive missions, where I'll rank, which ones are good and bad and which ones are my favorite, explaining as I go throughout. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video, and do you agree or disagree, and what's your favorites or your worst ones as well. And if you want, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description for free, as well as a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But let's get on with the video. So yeah, as with when I reviewed the missions for Kill Team originally, I will now do the same here. So this is once again requested by my patrons, one of my monthly requested videos. So yeah, I'll be rating them all. The important thing to remember, we are expecting an Into the Dark FAQ sometime, but I think it's still okay to rate the missions now, because the main things about the Into the Dark missions is how they are generally low scoring on the primary, as in you generally can't score turning point 1, and the primary points available is generally 12 total. So it's actually quite hard to max out for a single player. And also deployments are all symmetrical, and because we're using the competitive mission pack, there's no scatter terrain, so boards are very open, so it causes some interesting flaws for missions where there's sometimes basically no cover outside of barricades. So that's how I'll be kind of rating missions, based on playability and balance, if that makes sense. But it'll be more evident as I go into it. So let's go on, and I'll start with the best missions. Then I'll go with the worst, or best, the ones I think are okay, and then the worst. So let's get on with it. So for the best missions for Kill Team Into the Dark, first we have mission 1.1 Command Station Control. So as you can see, you've got a drop zone in each corner, and there's only 3 objectives. Now, while this board is kind of fixed, and you basically have to win, you have to commit to which zone, and generally you just commit to the closest objective and the middle, ignoring the third. You only score 1 VP a turning point for each objective marker you control. But I think this is a really good basic mission. While some people don't like it, how you can't really change lanes once you've committed, I think that's fine. It's a really good introductory mission to Into the Dark, and it's pretty balanced. While I would have liked some better ways to switch between lanes, I'm fine basically one player committing to their closest objective and then committing to the mid, ignoring the third objective. It is the more optimal way to play, but overall I think it's a really good Into the Dark mission. There's nothing too crazy here. It's pretty well balanced. There's nice avenues for attack. Not many long shooting lanes apart from the central room, which you can kind of mitigate with barricades, but still really solid. Next is mission 1.3 Supply Raid. So this mission special rule is secure supplies. So the pickup action can be performed upon objective markers. While you are carrying a marker, you cannot dash. And the first time a pickup action is done on an objective marker, you get 1 victory point. At the end of the battle, for each objective marker you control, you score 1 VP. For each objective marker friendly operatives are carrying, you score an additional VP. So it's kind of like secure archaeotech, but with different twist, right? Does look like a giant phallus, I will admit. You've got the top and then the 2 balls at the bottom, but I think this is a really good mission as well. So you've got long ways deployment, but there's really a lot of good ways for avenues of attack. Sure, you've got the 2 top rooms, which have large areas to be shot apart, but once again you can kind of mitigate with barricades. But both players generally go for their bottom objectives, and then you can either choose to pull back or commit into the middle. And I like how you can commit from either zone. So even if you win the top zone, you can then go down into the mid zone and so on. I think this mission is really solid. It's a lot of tactical play, and it balances perfectly between shooting and melee teams. And I just think it's a really good mission. Really fun to play on. While most of the scoring does happen at the end of the game, you do get some incentives to run and pick up objectives first to get more victory points early. So I just think it's a really good mission. Next, we have mission 2.2 Full-Scale Attack. So this mission, at the end of each turning point, for each beta objective marker you control, you get 1 victory point, and for each alpha objective control, you get 2 victory points. So as you can see, each player has, when you control enemy operatives, alpha objectives. So each player has 2 alpha objectives in their own deployment zones which they can't score from, but your opponent basically is mirrored and you want to score theirs. So what the game kind of becomes is, while the beta objectives are worth 1 victory point, they're actually not the end and be all of controlling. You still want to contest the rooms, but the main goal is to get to the alpha objectives. Now, the interesting thing, the path to both alpha objectives has open lanes, which, if you have the ability to rush down, is really strong, but basically have no cover outside of barricades. And even the beta objectives, they're quite exposed as well. So while it's not as good as the previous mission we talked about, I still like how there is some incentive to go for the mid and then push on into your opponent's opponent's zone. Like, what the goal is, you don't actually hold the mid, you actually want to get the mid and then push into your opponent's drop zone. But even then, like, if you look at the right beta objective, you don't actually get a good angle to do that. And you could argue just pushing for the 2 alphas and the beta in the big room is better, but it still offers a nice balance between shooting and melee. There are more wider fire lanes in this mission, as well as, like, you can see clearly into the other person's drop zone, but it's still got a nice avenue for melee operatives and kill teams. So I think this is a solid mission as well. Then we have mission 3.1, Forge Stronghold. So it has the special rule secure. At the end of each turning point, each objective marker friendly operatives controls is secured by your kill team, and while secured, it stays under control, even if there are no enemy operatives are within white of it, until an enemy operative moves to control it. At the end of each turning point after the first, for each objective you control, you get 1 victory point to a maximum of 4. There's 5 objectives, and it's effectively siege ground. But what I like is there's no real open fire lanes. There's nice access to all the rooms, and it's actually, like, it's harder for elite teams, but you do have to decide how you are going to play the mission. Like, obviously you want to go for the mid, but is it worth your kill team going for all 5 objectives, or should you just play for free? But even then, going for free isn't exactly safe because there's so many doors to get into objectives. And I think, you know, while it's harder on shooting teams, it's a mission where close combat and short-range firepower excels at. And I think this is really one of the better missions of Into the Dark. It's very close to play. It's one of the few missions which, no matter what happens with the ruling for forward deploys, can't be broken by forward deploys. It's just a really, really good mission, and I was surprised how much I liked it when I played it, considering I only think Siege Ground normally is just an okay mission. But for Into the Dark, I find this works really well. Now I'll cover the missions that I think are okay. You know, they're not amazing, but they're not terrible either. So first we have mission 1.2, Power Surge. So the mission and special rules are Power Surge. At the start of the first turning point, the defender selects one of the specified objective markers shown in the map to be the start of the Power Surge. Label that objective marker as 1. Each objective marker along the center line thereafter is then numbered in a sequential order, being 1 to 4. During each turning point, the objective marker with the number that corresponds with the current turning point, it is the Power Surge. Operatives can perform the following mission action, which is Siphon Power. This operative can perform this action while within black of an objective marker it controls. That is the Power Surge, and has not been siphoned during this turning point. Until the start of the next turning point has been siphoned. Each time a friendly operative performs a siphon action, you get 1 victory point. At the end of each turning point, if friendly operatives control 1 or more objective markers, you score a victory point. If friendly operatives control more than your opponent, you score 1 victory point. So, you know, you've got 4 objectives, and while I think it's a decent mission, my problem is it exemplifies the problems of Into the Dark, where it's really hard to switch lanes, and you effectively have to divide your kill team into 4 parts, or you just ignore certain objectives, right? And, like, if there were easier ways to move down the line, like through the chain of objectives, I think that's great. What I really like about this mission is how it incentivizes the defender, which is really good. The only problem is, yeah, like, this is actually really tough for elite teams because you can't really switch. Like, especially if you picked, like, the left or right objective, you're going to have to flood in there to, like, control, and then you're going to have to move back. And, like, the issue is you're going to have to send, depending where number 2 and 3 are, you're going to send operatives just to sit on those objectives and, you know, kind of wait for the objective to light up and then kind of move along. Like, as I said, what would make this mission better is if the doors were changed so there was an easier way to get to the objectives instead of committing. Because this, like, kind of punishes elite teams a lot and really incentivizes running larger teams. Like, I think Galapox Infected are probably almost impossible to beat on this mission because they have so many bodies and can just swarm each objective. Really, really tough. But yeah, it's okay. Just not something I would think is amazing. Next, we have Mission 3.2 Vault Plunder. Operatives can perform the following mission action: Power Down for 1 AP. An operative can perform this while within black of a conduit objective marker it controls. Remove that objective marker from the kill zone. Each time you perform the Power Down mission action, you score 1 VP, and at the end of the battle, for each Vault objective friendly markers control, you score 2 victory points for each of its conduit markers that have been removed from the kill zone. Note, if none of them have been removed, it's worth 0 victory points. So the problem I have is the L-shaped drop zones. They're not great. And then the other problem is it's basically a waiting game until the end of the game, because the biggest problem is you basically rush to the conduits 1 and 2, turn them both off, and then wait to commit to the vault room, because there's actually no reason to go inside the vault rooms until it's turning point 4 or the end of turning point 3. And once again, it's kind of in this weird thing where it's really hard to push into your opponent's drop zone because there's so much distance to move and the doors aren't in the great place or the walls aren't in a great place. So you end up having this really weird deployment zone. I think if the deployment zone was a big square instead of an L-shaped, it might be better. But there's like really no, like, my biggest downside about this mission is there's no real reason to push up. You literally go to the conduits, then run back out and wait to commit into the vault rooms. Like it's like the worst version of the normal kill team mission where you basically have 2 objectives you need to, like, disengage Archaeotech or something. I forget the name. But this is like a worse version of it. Like, if there was a better way to, like, have some rolling scoring, I think it'd make the mission more dynamic. At the moment, it's just quite stale. So it's not horrible. It's just predictable and static, which kind of exemplifies the flaws for Into the Dark with me. Then we have Mission 3.3 Exposed Trove. So operatives can perform the following mission action, which is Claim Loot for 1 AP. An operative can perform this while within black of an objective marker it controls that hasn't been looted until the next turning point you have looted it. Each time you loot an objective, you get 1 victory point to the maximum of 3. And at the end of the battle, each alpha objective you control is worth 2 victory points. So it's seize ground. It's loot and salvage with 4 objectives, but also some end game. And while it's not horrible, it's like, once again, L-shaped deployments, and the problem, the doors are in really weird places, right? So I understand they set up the doors in such a way so you can't score the alpha objectives from turning point 1, but it's such a weird mission. Like, I like loot and salvage, but this is a worse version of it. It's just a real slog to get to the objectives, and while the alpha objectives are quite safe, the 2 exposed objectives are way too exposed, and you have this weird scenario where the alpha objectives are oddly too safe once you get into them, because you go for your closest alpha objective, and then you effectively don't have the movement and APL to get to your opponent's alpha objective unless you kind of like abandon yours and leave 1 operative to do it. It's such a weird mission. I don't think you can fix it. Like, maybe adding 2 more objectives would help, but it's just a weird layout. It's not horrible. Like, it's still playable, but it's not my favorite mission. I think it's okay, but once again, it's just a weird placement of doors and the objectives themselves. So, like, it's just a weird mission somehow. Now we go on to the worst missions of Into the Dark. These are missions that are quite bad and personally should never play, but we'll get into it. So first up, we have Mission 2.1 Junction Assault. So you have sector control. For the purposes of determining victory points for the mission objective, for each friendly operative that would be within 2 different sectors, you must select one of those sectors for the operative to be treated as being within. And then the mission objective, at the end of each turning point after the first, you score victory points as follows to a maximum of 4. For each sector in which no enemy operatives are on your drop zone's side of the central line, you score 1 victory point. For each sector in which you have friendly operatives within blue of your opponent's drop zone, you score 1 victory point. So as you can see from this mission, you've got like hamburger deployment, quite large deployment areas in terms of like claiming. Like it's weird because of the mission size, they couldn't do like 4 sectors and the 3 sectors just look weird. So, you know, sector 1 is too big and then sector 2 and 3 are strange. The biggest problem with this mission, there are no objective markers. So if you have any TAC ops or faction TAC ops built or even abilities based around objectives, they're pointless here. And this mission is just 5 massive fire lanes. So you've got a fire lane on the left-hand side, a massive room with fire lane, like there's no cover. Then you've got the open snake maze, which is basically a massive fire lane as well. Then you've got the corridor of death, which is a fire lane, which you should fill up with barricades. And then you've got the right-hand flank, which is, once again, an open fire lane. So, and this mission is super easy to draw on, because if you try and push up to be within blue, you're in the open. And you don't have enough barricades to make it safe. Like, you want to put a barricade in the middle corridor, like in the right-hand corridor, just to stop people moving, like just to slow them down. And it's just a bad mission, right? I've seen people try and fix it by pushing it, by placing like either the drop zones kind of objectives or like putting dummy objectives in the middle. But we shouldn't be doing that, right? It's just a bad mission. If there was more inbuilt scatter, like you get with the narrative missions, this mission would be okay, right? But the fact it has no mission objectives, like no objective markers, messes up so many teams. And it's just a massive like shooting gallery. There is nowhere safe, right? Because there's only you only have 3 barricades. There's only so much you can do with 3 barricades. And this is a really easy mission to draw or lose on, because generally someone will go, oh, you know, I'm going to commit and try and get to your drop zone. And then they just go shot apart because there's nowhere safe to hide. So it's a horrible mission, just really, really bad, and quite shocking that this is a competitive mission, if I'm being honest. Then we have 2.3, Mysterious Signature. Operatives can perform the following mission action. Scan for 1 action point. You can perform this while within whatever objective mark you control. Roll a d6, adding 1 to result for each objective marker that has been removed from the kill zone. On a 1 to 5, remove that objective marker. On a 6, that objective marker is the source. Remove all other objective markers from the kill zone. You cannot perform this if the source objective marker has been determined. Each kill team can only perform this action once per turning point. Then you have Secure Mysterious Item. The pickup action can be performed upon the objective marker that is a source. The first time the pickup action would be performed upon the objective marker, 1 additional action point must be subtracted. Each time thereafter, you do as normal. While you're carrying it, you cannot perform any dash actions. Each time a friendly operative performs a scan mission action, you score 1 victory point. At the end of the battle, if you control the source, you score victory points. If you are carrying, you score additional 3 victory points. What's the problem with this mission, John? It's D6 and win. Like, you've got 6 objectives, right? D6 and win. You roll onto an objective, you roll a D6. If you get a 6, which is a crit, you win. Like, you just win. While it's not guaranteed to always happen, and you can only do this mission action once per turning point, it's ridiculous. On forward deploys, it's even worse. But the problem is, like, you either do it first and hope you roll a 6, right? Or you wait for your opponent to do it, going, they're not going to roll a 6, and then I can roll a 5 to 6 instead. Horrible mission, like horrible mission. The weird thing is, it's just, how is this a competitive mission? Like, if it was a narrative mission, I could understand. People were trying to argue with me, like, there is some tactical depth to it. Like, you always go for the furthest objective. And I'm like, no, you just literally walk up and do the closest one. There's no point. Like, while the door placement is oddly fine, the fact you could literally roll a d6, pick that up, and then move away is ridiculous. And while people go, oh, you need like 3 or 4 APL, that's true. But a lot of the good teams have 3 APL baked in, or ways to mitigate and like do mission actions for free and stuff. This mission is horrible. Like, it is generally bad, and you cannot fix it. Like, even if he says something like all the other objectives remain, this mission actively rewards you. If you, let's say you pick up the closest one to your drop zone, you roll a 6. Yeah, there's a barricade there. You're concealed. You've revealed it. You can't pick up first turning point. But if you're APL free, or like, you know, like your opponent now has to go, okay, I have to deploy everyone in each sector. And then, oh, okay, now it's in the closest one to your drop zone. I can't get there in time. Because all you do is like literally turning point 2, you pick it up and move behind the door, have someone close the door, and then you just run. Like, there's nothing you can do. And you commit your whole team. The worst thing is how there was a wall separating the drop zones with no doors. So your team is literally cut off from each other. And like with forward deploys, absolutely broken. Like more broken than normal. Such a horrible mission. Like the way you could kind of make it better is if you placed B3 with B1. So there's a door in the drop zone. But even then, like the mission, the objective design is like, you would need to remove the 2 closest objectives from each drop zone to make this okay. Like slightly less worse, right? This just, it's a bad mission. And I don't even know how it is a competitive mission. Like there are narrative missions in this book that are better designed than that mission. Like it's horrible, shockingly bad. So yeah, now we come to the Into the Dark mission overview. So as you know, there's actually a few missions I really like. There's 4 missions I like, 3 missions I think are okay, and 2 which I think are worse. Somehow worse than Master the Terminals. Like, Master the Terminals was hard. I didn't think you could make a worse mission than Master the Terminals, but I have been proven wrong with Into the Dark. While I do enjoy 4 of the missions, I will say I find all of the normal kill team missions far more enjoyable than the Into the Dark missions. Like my main problem with the Into the Dark missions is they're very low scoring. They incentivize TAC ops more than they should. And then the problem is TAC ops are really hard to score consistently or Into the Dark. So you have really bizarre low scoring games. Most of the missions are end of the game scoring, which allow lots of turtling and just waiting and doing nothing until the final turning point. Like there is ways around it, but the most efficient way is just to play and wait, right? Let your opponent come and commit, rush in and make mistakes. And oh my, the bad missions are really horrible. Like the fact there is no scatter terrain, like in the narrative missions, makes way more fire lanes than they should, especially as you can't claim cover from pillars in between walls, only at corners and doors, which, yeah, it makes it like Pathfinders are almost impossible to beat on mission 2.1 because they just laugh. They're like, oh, look, everywhere is just an open fire lane. This is great. Like, it's really bad, some of these missions. But some of the missions are really fun. Like, all the missions I said, which were my favorite, I think are actually quite engaging. Obviously, I'm playing in the mind, like, forward deploys aren't allowed. But even then, like, the 4th mission I selected, I think it was 3.1. That's really good because you can't score during the first turning point. So it makes forward deploying moot. But those are really good. And like, as I said with the normal kill team, like mission rating video, great missions are missions that I think are well balanced, well designed, missions you can play all the time as a TO and pick for your events and have no issue. The okay missions are fine. I wouldn't use them all the time, but they're nice to play like once and again, now and again. And then in my exception to the rule where I said the bad objectives, the bad missions you basically play maybe once or never, like once a year or something, never play the bad Into the Dark missions. Like 2.1 and 2.3, horrible. Don't play them. Like you can't fix 2.3. I've seen the fixes for 2.1 and they don't really work by just adding dummy objectives. Like that, those missions need reworking. Like you can kind of, like mission 2.3 is just horrible, bad layout, bad mission design altogether. And 2.1 needs, like, they need to rewrite the mission and you could kind of keep the boards, but they need to redo the mission entirely. And I think the missions are so bad, the community can't fix them. Because at the moment we have like TOs not using Master the Terminals and then 50-50 on not using Consecration. But like, you know, even before I looked at the missions properly, I was already being told by TOs, like, oh yeah, we banned 2.3 and we basically banned 2.1. And I can see why. Like, those missions are horrible, really bad. But like one mission that surprised me the most is mission 1.1. And while I see a lot of hate for it online, I really like it. You know, it's quite fixed and very League of Legends-y. But, you know, it's fine. You can, I'm ignoring bot lane. I'm just going mid and top lane. Like, where's my jungle? You know, you can just reenact League of Legends and blame your own operatives when you lose. Like, where's the medic? Where's the jungle? You know, it's great. I really like that mission. But yeah, you know, overall isn't bad. Like, as I said, there's a few missions I like, a few missions are okay. The bad missions are horrible, like way worse than I expected they could be. But I think you would have a fun selection from those missions. Now, I've played most of them, and I'm going to play more of them again. But that's just my opinion, you know, based on like playing lots of tournaments and stuff. So, yeah. But until next time, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of this video. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know. It'd be interesting to hear your takes on the Into the Dark missions. And if you want, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description below, as well as a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And remember, this is a Patreon video requested monthly by my patrons who are Adepts of the Crit and above. So let me just quickly thank my patrons. So for my Adepts of the Crit, I have Zamaru, Sam, Tarun, Kenzie, John Thomas, Captain Murder, Dave, Daniel, Average Joe 27, and Adzik. And then for my Veterans of the Crit, I have Samja. So thank you so much. Your support really means a lot to me and helps the channel, you know, and just like me improving stuff. So I really appreciate it. So that's pretty much it for me. You know, I've had a battle report for Into the Dark. I'll have another battle report, a Patron-requested battle report coming next week. And I'll have an article version of this in the episode description below if you want some written source, because I found like this is the kind of video I can do as an article as well. And a lot of TOs really find it useful, as well as like people doing club nights and stuff. So I like having this as a fixed, easy resource for everyone to access. So check it out if you can. But yeah, until next time, remember, no matter what the mission says, as long as you can roll a crit, you can win.